Okay, so we are recording and I need to make a Shallan update.
Go.
Shallan update quickly because I promised Natalie's timeline is ongoing.
Still in progress.
The color-coded document is evolving, apparently.
I found a continuity issue in my own notes, and I have to resolve it before I'm willing to make arguments in public.
A continuity issue in your notes. In the notes that are about the timeline that doesn't exist outside the books.
It's a very specific question about when exactly Vale became. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. 2 more weeks.
2 more weeks. Fine. Fine. Okay. Can I tell you what's been in my head all week? Because something happened, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since.
What happened?
Okay, so I was on Reddit, as I am, because I'm a healthy person with a healthy relationship to the internet.
Sure.
And someone posted this thread, just titled, "Wind and Truth was a betrayal, not a book." And it has, at the time I saw it, it had something like 3,000 upvotes. And then the top comment said, "No, it's the best thing Sanderson has ever written, and if you think it's a betrayal, you didn't understand what he was doing." And that had like 2,000 upvotes. And then those 2 comments just spiraled. Pages and pages of people absolutely going at each other over this book. Not, I liked it or I didn't like it. People making very specific structural arguments. It was like watching a fandom crack down the middle in real time.
I saw that thread.
You did?
I had 17 browser tabs open at one point, at midnight.
Okay, so it wasn't just me.
It wasn't just you.
Because I finished Wind and Truth, and I loved it. I want to say that up front. I cried at the ending. I cried in the middle. I had to put it down twice because I needed a minute to just exist after what was happening on the page. And then I went online expecting to find everyone talking about how incredible it was, and instead I found that split. And it confused me. And I've been trying to figure out ever since whether the people who hated it are wrong or whether I'm missing something.
And which is it?
I don't know yet. That's why we're here.
I have thoughts.
I know you have thoughts. You have 17 tabs of thoughts.
Some of them are still open, actually.
Of course they are.
The thing that struck me about that thread, and I've been sitting with it for a few days trying to find the right way to say it, is that both sides were right, simultaneously, and I don't think either side realised it.
Both sides were right.
The people who loved it are right that it's exceptional work. The people who called it a betrayal are right that it's a betrayal. Those are not contradictory statements. And once I figured that out, everything else made sense.
Okay, that's the thing. That's the thing you've been sitting on.
For 4 days, yeah.
Are you going to explain it?
I'm going to try. Give me a second to figure out where to start.
She needs a second.
I need a second. Okay, here's how I want to frame it. There's a thing I've been calling, in my head, just to myself, the Stormlight contract. And I think naming it is the only way any of this makes sense.
The Stormlight contract.
Books 1 through 4 made a very specific set of promises about how this story works. Not explicitly. Sanderson never stood up and said, "Here's what every book in this series is going to do." But structurally, in the architecture of how each book is built, he established a pattern. And that pattern is a contract. Because after you read 2 books that work the same way, you expect the third to work the same way. After you read 4, you don't even question it anymore. You know the shape of the thing. You've internalized it. And then book 5 walks in and changes the shape. Without announcement. Without warning. Just different.
Okay, but what is the contract specifically? Because the books feel different is too vague. What exactly are the terms?
The most obvious one is Ensemble. Every Stormlight book runs 5, 6, 7 characters with substantial POV arcs in parallel. Not a protagonist with supporting characters. An actual ensemble where the arcs feel roughly equal in weight.
Like you're reading 5 stories that happen to be happening at the same time.
Exactly. And every book has a dedicated flashback sequence. One character, their past, woven throughout as a structural spine. Kaladin in Way of Kings. Shallan in Words of Radiance. Each book literally tells you whose story it is through the flashbacks.
Which is also a promise about who the next book belongs to. You finish Oathbringer, and some part of your brain is already thinking, okay, whose flashbacks are next?
Yes. And then, this is the big one, every book builds toward the Sanderson Avalanche, the last quarter where everything that's been building separately suddenly converges. All the threads hit at the same time. You're overwhelmed by events arriving from every direction at once.
The thing that made me stand up off my couch.
The thing that made you stand up off your couch. And the Avalanche only works because of the Ensemble, because you've been running 5 separate arcs for 800 pages, and suddenly they're all detonating in the same 100. And the last piece, the stakes are always world level. Not will this character survive, but will this world survive this specific enormous threat?
And Wind and Truth breaks all of that.
Wind and Truth doesn't break all of it. That's actually the interesting part. Some of those promises it delivers on. But the ones it breaks decisively. And those happen to be the ones readers had the strongest attachment to.
Which ones?
The Ensemble. And the Avalanche.
Okay. I can feel where you're going, but I want to push back before we get there. Because Ensemble, Wind and Truth has an ensemble. There are multiple POV characters. It's not just Kaladin.
How many significant POV chapters does Shallan have in Wind and Truth?
I'd have to look it up.
She has chapters, but the ratio is so different from books 1 through 4 that it functions like a different book. Wind and Truth narrows. It narrows hard toward Kaladin. And if you were one of the readers who came to this series for Shallan, or for Adeline, or for Szeth, you are reading a book where your person is present but not centered. Not the way they used to be.
But Kaladin's arc in this book is enormous. It's the most interior Stormlight has ever been. The Shadesmar sequences, the whole contest of champion structure. What happens with his mental health through the back half?
I know. And I think that material is genuinely excellent. The Kaladin content in Wind and Truth is some of the best character work Sanderson has ever done. And it came at a cost. The cost was the Ensemble.
You're saying he chose?
I'm saying he chose. And the people who are angry about Wind and Truth are not angry that it's a bad book. They are angry because they signed a contract and then discovered the terms had changed at book 5.
I hate that contract is the right word for it. Because it's accurate and it makes me slightly upset at Sanderson, and I don't want to be upset at Sanderson.
I know.
He's so lovely in his videos and his talks, and he clearly cares about these books so much.
He does. And I think understanding why he made this choice is actually the most interesting part of the whole thing. Because I don't think he did it carelessly. I think he might have had no choice. But we need to establish what he broke before we can talk about whether he had to break it.
Okay, let's establish it properly. Okay, so I want to actually test this. Because you can name the contract, but until you hold it up against the specific books, it's still theoretical. And I have a question.
Go.
Oathbringer. Because that's the one I want to start with, not Way of Kings. Oathbringer is Dalinar's book. It's deeply personal. The flashback sequence is his. The entire emotional center of that book is one man's shame. And yet, you're telling me the Ensemble contract held.
Oathbringer is the most interesting test case for exactly that reason. Because it proves that the contract can survive even when one character's arc is clearly dominant. Dalinar owns that book emotionally. You cannot have my pain. That's the line the whole thing builds toward. But look at what's happening around him. Kaladin has a full arc. Shallan has a full arc. Bridge 4 gets substantial time. Adeline's material, the unmade threats, the Horniator peaks, you're running 5 or 6 threads simultaneously. And the Avalanche is the Battle of Thaylen City, which is one of the most ambitious set pieces in the series because Sanderson is managing every major character in the same event at the same time.
Different characters, different locations in the same battle, all converging on the same climactic moment.
And Dalinar's "You cannot have my pain" lands so hard precisely because while his internal arc was building, you were also watching Kaladin and Shallan make their own choices at the same moment in story time. The Ensemble makes Dalinar's moment bigger, not smaller.
So even when one character is the emotional center, the contract holds because everybody else is still running at full speed around them.
That's the mechanic. And that's exactly what changes in Wind and Truth.
Okay, but hold on. Before we get to Wind and Truth, I actually want to point out something about Rhythm of War that I think is important. Because I'm not sure the contract was as clean as you're making it sound by Book 4.
Sam, what do you mean?
Rhythm of War is the most structurally complex Stormlight book. The flashback sequence is Eshonai and Venli, which is already a departure, right? 2 characters sharing a flashback arc instead of one. Navani's storyline with a sibling runs almost entirely separate from everyone else for most of the book. Adolin is in Shadesmar doing his own thing, and the avalanche at the end is enormous. The tower, the sibling, Kaladin's 4th ideal, Navani's decision, Venli's choice, but the seams are showing. The structure is straining to hold all of those threads together. And I remember reading it and thinking, I remember thinking this specifically. How does he do this again? How does he add more threads and still land them all at the same time?
That's okay. I wasn't expecting you to be the one to bring that up.
What, I can't notice structural things?
No, you can. You're right. Rhythm of War is the contract at maximum capacity. Every arc gets its payoff in the climax. The POV distribution is relatively even. Nobody is neglected. But the book is doing so much work to maintain that balance that you can almost feel the architecture creaking. And if you're the kind of reader who notices that, you might have been wondering, even before Wind and Truth, whether this pattern could survive another round.
Which is why I think jumping straight to Wind and Truth without acknowledging that is unfair. Because it makes it sound like Sanderson was cruising along with a perfect machine and then randomly broke it. And I don't think that's what happened. I think the machine was already at the limit.
Okay, that's fair. And it actually makes the Wind and Truth shift more interesting, not less. Because if the pattern was already straining in Book 4, then what happened in Book 5 isn't a random deviation. It might be the inevitable consequence of a structure that was never designed to scale to 5 books.
But we need to actually look at what Wind and Truth does differently. Specifically,
right. The flashback sequence is Szeth, which makes sense. It's his book to complete. But the POV distribution is visibly different from any previous Stormlight. Kaladin dominates. Shallan, Adolin, the other characters, they're present, but you're aware in a way you weren't in books 1 through 4 that this is Kaladin's book in a way. No previous Stormlight was any one character's book.
Is that actually true structurally, or is it a perception thing? Because some people online were arguing that the POV distribution isn't that different, that readers just notice it more because Kaladin's arc is so internal.
Someone on Reddit actually broke down the page count by POV, and the numbers are noticeably skewed compared to previous books. But even if you argue the numbers are closer than they feel, and that argument exists, the weight isn't equal. 400 pages of Kaladin in Shadesmar, working through his trauma hits differently than 400 pages of Kaladin doing military things. The interiority concentrates attention. When a character is thinking this hard, everyone else feels further away, even when they're technically on the page.
Okay, but, and this is important, Kaladin's arc in Wind and Truth is not just Kaladin thinks about his feelings for 400 pages. Structurally, what happens to him is the thematic resolution of everything the series has been building toward. The question all 5 books have been asking, whether broken people can be healed. Kaladin is the vessel for that question. And this book answers it. The answer requires interiority. You can't answer that through battles. You have to go inside.
I agree with that completely. The interiority is earned and necessary. But here's the distinction I don't think people are making clearly enough. The contract didn't promise Kaladin would be interior. It promised the ensemble would remain roughly balanced while individual characters went internal. Rhythm of War gives you Navani's interior arc, and the ensemble is still running at full speed around her. Wind and Truth gives you Kaladin's interior arc, and the ensemble slows. It doesn't disappear, but it slows.
So the argument isn't Kaladin shouldn't have gotten this arc. The argument is This arc displaced other arcs in a way the contract didn't prepare us for.
Exactly. And the Sanderson Avalanche, which might be the more significant departure.
The Contest of Champions.
In books 1 through 4, the Avalanche is a convergence. Separate threads arriving at the same point from different directions. In Wind and Truth, the Contest of Champions means the climax is structurally a single thread that other characters are observers of. It's not an avalanche, it's a culmination. One arc reaching its completion with supporting characters in attendance.
I remember finishing and thinking that was extraordinary and also somehow different from everything before it. And I couldn't name why. I kept waiting for the other threads to land and they didn't land in the same way. And then the book was over and I had this feeling of, not disappointment, but something adjacent to it.
What did you call it?
I called it, "This isn't the book I was expecting," which is different from, "This is a bad book," but it's a real feeling. And apparently a lot of people had that feeling.
Sanderson himself had it. He said publicly, in one of his newsletters, that he was worried about fan reaction to Wind and Truth. He specifically acknowledged the book was different. He knew he was handing readers something that didn't match the pattern. He went in knowing it was going to surprise people.
And there's the editor thing.
Peter Ahlstrom, his primary developmental editor for the Stormlight series. Sanderson lost regular access to him in 2020. I'm not saying Wind and Truth is the way it is because of the editor change. Sanderson is an extremely deliberate writer and these were his decisions. But the book that breaks the pattern is also the book where the editorial relationship was different from the previous 4. I'm noting a correlation, not making a causal argument.
That feels like it could be significant or a total coincidence and we're not qualified to know which.
Exactly. But here's what we can look at. The reception data. Goodreads ratings for Wind and Truth, and someone correct me if I'm off on exact numbers, placed it slightly lower than Words of Radiance and Oathbringer. But the average isn't what's interesting. The distribution is. It's not that 2- and 3-star reviews are dragging the average down. It's that there are significantly more 1-star reviews than any previous Stormlight book, alongside a higher concentration of 5-star reviews. The people who loved it intensely. The people who didn't, really didn't.
A bimodal split.
That bimodal distribution is what a divided fandom looks like in data. And it maps exactly to the contract. If you came for Kaladin, you probably loved it. If you came for the Ensemble experience, you probably felt betrayed.
And I think both of those reactions are legitimate, and I think they're going to have a very hard time understanding each other. But there's actually another layer to this whole thing that I don't think we can avoid. Because the contract didn't just change structurally. Something else shifted in Wind and Truth. Something about the language itself. And the internet nearly collapsed about it.
Yeah, we need to talk about that.
Okay, I want to talk about the therapy language thing. Because I don't think we can do this episode without it. And I've been seeing it in every corner of the discourse, and I have a lot of feelings about it.
The therapist scene.
Sanderson, in Wind and Truth, has a character use the word therapist explicitly in a fantasy world that is definitionally not our world. And the internet nearly collapsed.
It didn't nearly collapse, but the reaction was disproportionate. Yeah.
There were people who said it pulled them completely out of the book. Like, they hit that word and the immersion broke. Instantly. And I've seen that response from readers who otherwise loved everything else about Wind and Truth. And I've also seen people say, "Who cares? It's a word. Move on. The emotional content is what matters." And I genuinely don't know which reaction I think is correct.
What was your reaction when you hit it?
Honestly, I noticed it. I registered it as unusual, but I kept reading. It didn't pull me out. Mostly because the scene was so emotionally effective that I didn't want to stop.
That's interesting. Because I think that reveals something about the therapy language debate that people aren't quite naming correctly. The argument isn't purely about the word therapist. It's about a broader pattern. Kaladin's arc in this book is structured around very modern, very specific psychological frameworks. The inner world concept. The name your trauma to overcome its structure.
The process of identifying cognitive patterns and working through them consciously.
Exactly. And there's no version of Roshar's history where that vocabulary developed organically. It's imported.
But is that actually different from what Sanderson has been doing all along? Because Kaladin's depression in Words of Radiance is written with a specificity and accuracy that clearly draws on modern understanding of depression. Sanderson has clearly read about depression or talked to people with depression or both. The accuracy of how it reads is not accidental. So in some sense, the modern psychological understanding has always been underneath the surface.
That's a really good point. And I think it actually explains the Wind and Truth reaction better than Sanderson made a mistake. In books 1 through 4, the psychological accuracy is there, but it's expressed through the story. You feel the depression because of what Kaladin does, what he can't do, what he thinks in the dark. It's translated into the world's terms: bridge runs, light eyes and dark eyes, storm-blessed curses. The modern framework is the engine, but you don't see the engine.
And in Wind and Truth, the engine is visible.
Particularly in the Shinovar sequences, the vocabulary surfaces. And once you can see the engine, the illusion changes.
So it's not that the therapy content is new. It's that the layer of fantasy translation got thinner.
And that connects directly to the broader contract question. Books 1 through 4 mediate everything through Roshar's context. The Spren, the ideals, the Knights Radiant, all fantasy translations of real psychological concepts. Trusting yourself, admitting your failures, accepting your limitations. They're given Rosharan clothes. Wind and Truth remove some of those clothes. And readers who were here for the mediated version felt it.
Okay, but I want to make the case for what Sanderson was doing, because I think the decision to surface that vocabulary was intentional and might be defensible.
Go.
Kaladin's arc in Wind and Truth is specifically about healing, not finding the strength to fight again. Healing, real healing. The kind where you sit in a room and someone helps you name the things that are wrong. And if you're going to write that honestly, you need to get specific. Because the vague fantasy version of healing, and then the hero found peace, is exactly the kind of thing that is actually harmful to readers who are struggling with the same things Kaladin is struggling with. It's too neat. It doesn't show the work. And I think Sanderson was trying to show the work. And showing the work required language specific enough to be recognizable.
I think that argument is right, and I think it's a little separate from whether therapist specifically was the right word choice. The psychological specificity can be achieved without that particular term. So the question is whether Sanderson chose the immersion-breaking word deliberately to make it more recognizable, more direct, more useful to readers who are in that place, or whether it just didn't occur to him that it would land that way.
I think he knew. I think he chose it on purpose.
Why?
Because he's talked about Kaladin's mental health content very deliberately in his author notes and signing events. He said explicitly that he wants people who are struggling with depression to see themselves in Kaladin. And if you want someone who is in the middle of that to see themselves, you might need to use the word they use. A Rosharan word they've never heard might not reach them the same way.
That's okay. That's actually a stronger defense of the choice than anything I've heard in any of those Reddit threads.
I've had some time to think about it.
But I don't think it's as clean as he was right to do it, or he shouldn't have done it. The fandom discourse keeps treating this like a verdict, guilty or not guilty. And I think it's more like a trade. He traded immersion for directness. Some readers got the better end of that trade. Some didn't.
Is the therapy language thing connected to the contract thing? Like, is it a symptom of the same shift? Or is it its own separate issue?
I think it's a symptom. The thing that changed in Wind and Truth, on multiple levels, is that the mediation thinned. The ensemble was there, but less foregrounded. The translation layer was there, but more transparent. It's the same Sanderson, the same care, the same ambition. But something turned more direct, more exposed. And Therapist is the most visible example of that shift. But it's not the only one.
The mediation thinned. That's a really precise way to say it.
Thank you. I've been workshopping it for 4 days.
Of course you have. Okay, actually, I want to ask you something. If you're listening to this and you hit that word therapist in Wind and Truth, did it pull you out? Because I'm genuinely curious whether this is a widespread thing or whether the people who were bothered are just louder about it. In my experience, the people who love the book tend to stay quiet, and the ones who bounced off something write the Reddit posts. So if the word landed fine for you, if the scene worked and the vocabulary didn't break anything, we need to hear that too. This discourse is missing that voice.
We also want to know, is anyone out there who started the series after Wind and Truth was published? Because if you came in knowing what Wind and Truth is, your relationship to the contract is completely different from someone who waited 10 years for it. That perspective would be genuinely interesting.
Yes! Comments. All of the comments. We're doing science.
Very rigorous science. Okay, here is the question I actually want to argue about. Because everything we've established so far, the contract, what Wind and Truth does differently, the therapy language, all of that is basically diagnosis. The more interesting question is, did he have to? Could a Sanderson have written a 5th Stormlight book that fully honoured the contract? Or was the contract unsustainable?
Oh, that's actually the question.
Because if the answer is yes, he could have done it and chose not to, that's a real critique. He made a creative decision that sacrificed reader expectation for artistic reasons, and you can evaluate that decision. But if the answer is no, the contract was going to break no matter what, because the pattern was unsustainable, that changes everything. That means the betrayal was always coming. The only question was when.
I want to make the case that he could have done it. But first, I want to throw something back at you that I've been sitting on since episode 1.
Go on.
You said in our first episode, your exact words, the Cosmere's greatest strength is sustained interiority. You argued for most of that episode that the reason these books are extraordinary is the thing they do that no screen can replicate. The depth of being inside someone's head for hundreds of pages. You said that.
I did say that.
Wind and Truth is the most interior Stormlight book, by a significant margin. You just spent 20 minutes explaining how Kaladin's arc this book is defined by interiority. So, Natalie, if sustained interiority is the Cosmere's greatest strength, why are you arguing that this book, the most interior one, broke something?
I was wondering when you were going to do that.
I've been holding on to it for 3 blocks.
I know, I could tell.
Well...
Okay, here's my honest answer. I was not wrong in episode 1. Sustained interiority is the Cosmere's greatest strength, and Wind and Truth deploys it, maximally. The Kaladin material in this book is the most sustained, most ambitious interiority Sanderson has ever attempted, and it's incredible. I'm not arguing it isn't.
But
What I was describing in episode 1 was the strength of interiority within an ensemble structure. The power of being inside Kaladin's head for 100 pages works in the previous books, partly because you've just spent 50 pages with Shallan and 50 pages with Dalinar. The contrast creates the depth. The movement between interior experiences is what makes each one land harder. Wind and Truth gives you Kaladin's interiority without the same level of counterweight. And without counterweight, the interiority changes. It's still powerful, but it's different.
So the ensemble structure amplifies the interiority.
I'm saying the ensemble was doing work that we didn't notice until it was reduced.
Okay. That's actually a really interesting answer, and I'm slightly upset that I can't fully refute it. But here's my counter. I think there's a version of what you're describing that is just reader preference dressed up as structural analysis. Because the readers who loved Wind and Truth, the 5-star reviews, the best Sanderson has ever written crowd, they're also getting sustained interiority. And they're not missing the ensemble the same way. They came for Kaladin's arc. They got it. They found the counterweight in the Szeth flashbacks, in the way Szeth and Kaladin's arcs mirror each other. That is structure. It's a different structure.
I agree. The Kaladin Szeth mirror is intentional and effective. The Contest of Champions gives the book a unifying framework that the previous books didn't have. You could argue that's actually more structurally controlled, not less. But readers who internalize the previous structure experience the change as a loss, even when they could see the new structure was working.
So the issue is not that Wind and Truth is structurally worse. The issue is that it's structurally surprising.
After 10 years and 4,000 pages, the structure was so deeply internalized that different felt like broken.
Which is almost Sanderson's fault for being so consistent in the first place.
He was too reliable, and now the deviation hurts. That might be the most unusual criticism of a writer I've ever heard.
But it's true! If books 1 through 4 had been more variable, if Oathbringer had narrowed the ensemble and Rhythm of War widened it again, we'd have been trained to expect variability. The contract only has the power it has because Sanderson honored it so completely for 4 books.
Okay, here's where I actually land. And this surprised me when I got here.
Where?
I think the contract was unsustainable.
Okay.
Not because Sanderson is losing capacity. His craft is as sharp as ever, and Wind and Truth is evidence of that. But because the contract required increasing scope with each book. More characters, more threads, more simultaneous arcs, more things converging in the Avalanche, and Rhythm of War is already at the ceiling. Adding another book at the same structural level would have started to feel mechanical, like executing a formula rather than telling a story.
So Sanderson had to break the contract.
I think he had to try something different. Whether breaking the contract was the only way or just the way he chose, I genuinely don't know. But the readers who are angry deserve to be angry, and the contract was always going to break at some point. The form was too ambitious to sustain indefinitely. That doesn't make the disappointment less real, but it means there might not be a version of this where nobody's disappointed.
And then there's the 2031 problem.
Yeah.
Wind and Truth doesn't fully end. It ends in a place where multiple major threads are clearly designed to be resolved in Stormlight 6, which is, 6-7 years away? People are sitting with a structurally unusual book that also functions as a setup volume. They didn't get the full contract, and they didn't get the resolution. A different book and a longer wait.
Sanderson has acknowledged that Wind and Truth is a transition volume in some ways, deliberately setting up the back half more than any previous book set up the next. Which I understand from a craft perspective and which is genuinely hard to sell to readers living in real time.
The Empire Strikes Back comparison. I keep seeing it. Wind and Truth is The Empire Strikes Back. Darker, more personal, doesn't resolve everything. But that's the point.
The Empire Strikes Back worked partly because the gap between films was 3 years. And partly because film audiences understand sequels. They know they're watching part 2. Stormlight readers were told this was an ending. Book 5 was the conclusion of the first arc. A first arc conclusion that leaves major threads open and asks you to wait 6 years is a different thing from Empire. The analogy isn't wrong exactly, it just elides the specific pain of waiting.
And some of the people who read Way of Kings when it came out in 2010 have been with this series for 15 years.
15 years is a long contract.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so where do we actually land? Because I feel like we've established a lot of things and I want to know what we're taking away from this.
What I'm taking away is the anger at Wind and Truth is legitimate. Not because the book is bad. The book is not bad. But because the structure changed, the change wasn't announced. And the people who are angry about a real thing. The contract was real. The deviation was real. And you should appreciate what he gave you instead of mourning what the contract promised is not actually a useful response to that.
But I also don't want to be in a place where we're saying Wind and Truth was a failure, because I don't believe that. I think it's going to read very differently when the back 5 exist. I think when Stormlight 6 comes out, whenever that is, and you can see what Wind and Truth was setting up, the book changes. The things that felt unresolved will have their resolution. The structural narrowing might make sense as the hinge point at the story needed to turn on.
That's possible. I believe that about the content. I'm less sure it resolves the structural betrayal feeling, because that's not about whether the threads get resolved. It's about the experience of reading book 5, expecting one kind of book and getting another. That's already happened. Stormlight 6 can't unhappen it.
That's sad, actually.
Yeah, I think that's the genuinely sad part of this whole thing. Sanderson couldn't have both. He couldn't write the most personal, most interior version of Kaladin's healing and give readers exactly what they'd been promised for 10 years. Something had to give. And he chose the version that he thought served the story better. And I think he was right. And I also think it cost something real.
I keep thinking about the people who came into Stormlight specifically for Shallan. Because you know those people exist. Shallan is one of the most discussed characters in the whole fandom. The Shallan theorists, the people who have mapped every timeline of her arc across all 5 books.
The color-coded ones.
The color-coded ones. And Wind and Truth, Shallan is in it. Her arc continues, but it's not her book in the way Words of Radiance was her book. And if that was the book you were waiting for, if you'd been waiting 10 years for the conclusion that Words of Radiance was setting up, Wind and Truth is not that book. And no amount of "but Kaladin's arc is incredible" fixes that.
I know.
Do you feel that way about your Shallan episode?
A little. Yes. I've read the Shallan content in Wind and Truth twice now. It's good. It's genuinely good. But there's a specific thing I was hoping would happen with her arc in this book, and it didn't happen in the way I imagined. And I had to decide whether that means the book failed or whether my expectation was the thing that wasn't going to survive.
And which is it?
My expectation.
Yeah.
The book didn't fail my expectation. I just had the wrong expectation. And I think that's the honest answer for a lot of the angry people in that Reddit thread, even if they won't say it. The book they were imagining wasn't going to exist. Sanderson was always going to write this book, or something like it, at some point, because the series needed to shift to be able to complete. We just didn't know it until now.
Do you think he'll go back to the contract in Stormlight 6?
I think the back 5 is its own arc with its own structural logic, and we don't know yet what that looks like. If I had to guess, the Ensemble comes back, but differently configured. Not the same Ensemble. Some characters we know, new characters, and the Avalanche structure probably returns because that's one of the things Sanderson does at the cellular level. But it won't be a restoration of the original contract. It will be something new.
And we'll be having another version of this conversation in whenever.
In however many years it takes.
Okay. Here's where I'm going to land on this. Wind and Truth is an exceptional book. I believe that. And it broke a contract. I believe that too. And I don't think I need those to resolve into one clean answer. The question I'm going to be sitting with is not, did Sanderson make the right choice? But what was the cost? And was it worth it? And I think reasonable people are going to disagree on that for a long time. Probably until Stormlight 6 tells us what he was building toward.
The answer might be yes. The whole thing might read as necessary, in retrospect. Wind and Truth might be the book where the series changed into something that could actually complete. And we're just too close to it to see that.
And we're asking the fandom to wait 6 years to find out.
15 years in, 6 more years is... yeah,